702 podcasts are on 702.co.za.
14 minutes after 9. His name is Tukelo Hlagala, and he is my guest. He's here in the studio. He's written a book called Poor Folks. It's an anthology of 4 essays. Yeah. Brilliantly written. I'll perhaps take something out and read for you as we continue with the conversation. And he joins me now in studio. Tukelo, thank you so much, my brother, for joining me. I really appreciate your time and you coming into studio. I really appreciate it. Are you well?
I'm well, brother Aubrey, and yourself?
I'm good, man. I'm just so impressed.
I'm happy to be here myself.
Yeah, 26 years old. You've already written your first book.
Yes, sir.
And it is a self-published book called Poor Folks. Why, Tukelo? Most people your age are jiving to my piano. They want to own a brand, or they want to be a DJ, and they can dance up a storm. You don't look like the dancing type.
I'm not.
Yeah. How did you land here, man? And you're from Mumps, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Most guys your age, where I come from, are not writing books.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
I think it started at a very early age. And for me, I think it generally came from a place of loss. And so I started reading books. I remember I was in grade 5 or 6 when I read Zakes Mda's Ways of Dying.
Wow.
And I read Maru by Bessie Head.
Yes.
So I think from that early age. Yeah. So I don't know, but there was something about these stories that made me gravitate towards them.
Yeah.
I think generally it was a place of loss, trying to understand the world around me. You know, the question of who am I in society?
Right.
And so particularly Ways of Dying, you know, I think I related a lot to the main character. I think it was Tologi. So I think from that point on, there was something I found compelling about stories.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I started reading and writing.
Give me a sense of what was going in your life that you've called loss.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a time of confusion. It sounds like a time of not just loss, but a time of loss of identity.
Definitely. So at the time, I had moved from Limpopo to Mamelodi. So I moved from Limpopo when I was doing grade 2. So grade 3, I came to Mamelodi. And now I think I find myself in a new environment. And with new environment, I wasn't sure what was expected of me. You know, so I think the new environment, you know, made me feel lost in this new world to say, who am I in this new world? And so, yeah, in these stories, particularly in Ways of Dying, I found that the character was, you know, similar to me. He too had moved from a village to the city. And so I felt some similarities in the story. And that is when, you know, the thing of stories began to speak to me a lot.
I think we underestimate the transition and the difference, the social differences of life in the village, in the rural areas, and life in the urban areas. It's a very well documented issue. There's been many stories that have been written about that space, right?
Yeah.
That transition, the difference, the social differences of township versus village life, right?
Yeah.
It's highly documented in many different ways. But I think those that have not had the experience of the two worlds may not understand how traumatic it can be,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I found myself in that particular space. And so for me, I think stories became a way in which I was trying to sort of find the answers to who can I be, what identity should I take in this new world of mine.
You know, back in the day, there were movies that were made. I remember guys like Simon Sabela. You won't remember. Simon Sabela. There was a play or a series on television called Senzegile, about a young girl who leaves the rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal looking for fortune in the city of gold, comes to Soweto and goes through a whole sorts of processes, and many other stories that have been made and written about and many other stories that have been written about that moment, that reality. And that for me is the silver lining in your dark cloud, that it made you start to search, to read, to look for other people's thoughts about life. What did you find?
So Yeah, I think what I found generally.
And how old were you again?
I started reading, I think I was in grade 5. Yeah, in primary.
Yeah.
So it was
English books.
English books.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I think generally what I found is that, at certain points of transitions, we most of the time feel a sense of loss, a sense of not belonging. It can be transitioning from one company to the other. You are in a whole new culture.
Yeah.
And so, I think that is, exactly what I found to say. With transition comes a sense of loss at times. And oftentimes it takes a bit of time to find your sort of identity in this new world you are in.
And you end up in 2021 writing Poor Folks?
Yes. So the journey of writing started somewhere last year. I think it was after we had a conversation, you, myself, and Howard at Moss Cafe.
Yes.
So during the beginning of the lockdowns, I was there.
All right.
I was there. So I think during lockdown, I had ample time. There was nothing to do, and so I think I started immersing myself in the stories around me and overall my world to say what are some of the things that I'm struggling, from. And what are the people around me struggling for? So that's where the whole theme of Poor Folks came to play. And I thought, why not document the stories that I'm hearing as I'm walking the streets? So this whole book, I can say, as much as it's fiction, it's more of exaggerated reality, so that it can be compelling. So I generally took the stories that I saw around me and documented them into, this anthology.
Poor Folks.
Yes, sir.
Why that title? What does it mean, and how is it connected to the 4 stories that are in this particular anthology, and I suppose the intersectionality of the stories that you tell in the story? Why Poor Folks?
Yeah, I think generally almost all of the characters in the different 4 stories are sort of plagued by poverty, but the results for many of them it's different, and so I wanted a title that can accommodate all the 4 stories in the book. And so when you look at the book, the general theme is poverty, but within there are sub-themes that, these other people are suffering from, whether it's an issue of loneliness, aloneness, and all these other dimensions. But the common theme that they have is that of poverty.
What is poverty?
Poverty, I can say it's lack of something. And most of these people in the stories lack, money. And by lacking money, they lack other needs, as Maslow would say in the hierarchy of needs. It can be psychological needs. It can be a sense of belongingness to say, if I don't have money, when the guys are going out, I can't go out with them. And so now I find myself isolated in my own world because I don't afford to be with the guys when they are going out, or a sense of I cannot provide for my family. So now I'm sidelined from, the family because I cannot provide for it. So those are some of the different dynamics that, you find when you read, the different stories.
Give me a call if you have any resonance with the experience of having been a person who lived in the rural areas and made the transition to come and live in the urban areas. Yeah. It may have been to a township or perhaps to the city, a suburb. How was it like? What was it like? I unfortunately am a mum's boy. I don't come from anywhere else. I don't know anything else. But I've seen how difficult it has been for many people that I know who grew up in the village, in the rural areas, amidst the mockery sometimes, amidst the cultural shock, particularly around people that look like you.
Yeah.
So the people look like you, but they are nothing like you.
Similar but different.
Yeah, the value systems are different.
Yeah.
The things that people in the townships hold dear versus to people in the villages are completely different. So it's a major culture shock very often. And I imagine it would be the same the other way around, right? I mean, I imagine it would be the same for somebody living Kokasi and going back home into the rural areas. But what for you was the moment of the most memorable culture shock?
I think for me, it was from a perspective of values, in that some of the things that I think I valued at the time, I realized for people my age, in Mamelodi, they were not really valuing the same things. And so, for me, it made me question to say, but are these things that I'm valuing valuable? Since, the people around me don't particularly value these things. So it was a matter of now questioning the values that I had to say, are they really valuable? So the change caused, confusion to some of the values, because now the reality of who I am now, it's different from where I came. So do I adapt to the new world around me, or what do I do?
And it raises a very interesting question about how we interpret the issue of values, right? Are values values because they are the accepted norm of a particular environment, or are values bigger than that? Do they stand alone? In fact, are we to adjust to the values, or are we to assimilate to the society that may carry different values? And I'm sure those kinds of questions did arise in your mind as you went through these experiences. What were the answers?
Yeah, because generally thinking, I think it was a matter of saying, I want to belong to this new world that I find myself in. And so if I'm to belong here, then it means I need to sort of remodel certain philosophies or ideas I have about life. So I think for a long time in my youth, I think I felt lonely and alone. And I think I echo that in the last story in the book, the sense of being around people, but then being alone, because you're constantly thinking, but then am I in the right place? Am I doing the right things? So I think for a long time in my youth, hence I spent most of my time reading books because I was looking for these answers, and so I think much later on in life, I began to understand some of the dynamics around these things to say, okay, as much as you have this certain set of beliefs and values, it's okay to fit in without compromising certain fundamental things in your life.
One of the things that I found a little disconcerting when I looked at the title of the book and some of the stories inside of the book, and I need you to help me out here, was the idea of the appropriation of the title of poverty. I know poverty is not a good thing. It's not a nice thing.
Yeah.
And many people will agree with me that poverty, there's no glory in poverty.
Yeah.
It's difficult. There's nothing good about poverty, right? But I sometimes get the sense, and this is where I need you to help me out, that poverty gets romanticized sometimes to a point where it becomes a sought after title. Not the experience, but the title.
Yeah.
I want to be known as the poor guy so that I hold a certain position in society. A position that gives me the ability to judge. A position that gives me the ability to say they, whoever they may be, who don't, in my mind, have a right to have this title of poverty, contested terrain poverty, for various reasons. Not the experience, but the title. I want you to talk to me about that and how that relates to the choosing of your title of the book. Because I'm concerned about how poverty can be a sought-after title under certain circumstances, in certain contexts. Your thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, so I think to speak on that, I would say growing up, there were people who came from, good families, financially.
Yeah.
And funny enough, sometimes they felt out of place, because now the majority of us came from lack. And so we end up mocking those who have, So I think, in my view, sometimes you hold...
say it again. You end up mocking those who have. Okay.
Exactly. So in that, you, by virtue of having, you sort of become a villain of sort to say you have the things that we don't have. So what we will do, we'll mock you. So sometimes you find there's an instance where those who have don't feel like they belong if they're in a particular world whereby the majority doesn't have. And so I think for me, generally speaking, I would say sometimes, we lash back at those who have because of the frustrations of not having, and so, that's what I generally think to say. Sometimes we are saying them or we lambaste them because we don't see any way of becoming them or of transcending from the poverty that we are in.
Poverty is a reality. Poverty is a reality that is undesirable in terms of experience. Yeah, because you can probably see that I'm emphasizing the fact that there's the experience of poverty, and then there is the status, the political status of poverty, which can be abused sometimes by those who are not so poor.
Oh, yes. It's getting political.
Yeah, you know where I'm going. But particularly by those who are not so poor, who understand the experience of poverty because maybe they came from it, and understand the political value of the title of poverty, and in that successfully exploit the poor by speaking the language of poverty in ways that are true because they come from it. But they are not themselves experiencers of it, and become the holders or the wielders of the sword called poverty. Unfairly so. Unjustly so. Unethically so. You know who I'm talking about.
I think I do.
Yeah? You want to take a break?
Let's walk the talk.
Streaming countrywide on the 702 app.
An awkward laugh ensued after I asked that question. Yeah. 27 minutes to 10 o'clock. My guest is author and thinker. His name is Tukelo Hlagala. He's 26 years old, has written his first book, self-published. Tell me about the self-publishing journey. I mean, why did you self-publish? Why didn't you go to one of the big publishing houses and say, hey, I've got 4 essays that I've written. I'm a well-spoken, deep thinker from Mamelodi via Limpopo. And I'm here to ask you to write my book for me or publish my book. Why didn't you do that?
So, I mean, I've had an experience with my friend here, Howard, who's written a book. And from his experiences, it was a very daunting process of rejection from one place to the other. So from the word go, I set my mind to self-publishing, in that I'll look for my own editors for whatever reasons or whatever capabilities they have. And through them, I will share my story as raw as I want to share it, without someone telling me I should, change this part, but more of
pander to a particular market segment.
Exactly.
Don't say it like this. Say it like this.
So I had a conversation with my editors to say, your job is to help me articulate this thing better, not to tell me to change my messaging. So I was very adamant from the word go that I'm gonna do self-publishing.
011-883-0702. Give us a call. We're talking about poverty and how poverty can be exploited by the not so poor. Yeah, we're talking about a distinction between the experience of poverty and the appropriation of poverty by those who understand the political value of poverty for their own gains. Yeah? So when I asked that question, there was an awkward laugh. Because we know what we're talking about, don't we?
We do.
And by the way, I know that you, as you listen to this conversation, know what I'm talking about. I know that you know. Yeah. And I know that you know what we're talking about. And by the way, it's not a purely South African phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's global. How people exploit the poor because of the value of the status, political status of poverty. You said that poverty was lack. And I suppose it is a fitting definition. Lack of what?
So for me, it's lack of means to achieve a particular thing in your life. So I'd say lack of means.
Yeah.
And
in some of the things that you were talking about, you you mentioned how somebody might not have enough money to go out with his friends on a night out. Is it possible perhaps to entertain the idea that poverty is relative?
Definitely.
And that poverty is relative in the sense that what you might call poverty, somebody might understand that to be prosperity.
Definitely.
Did you entertain some of those ideas in your book?
Most definitely I did, because at the same time I understand there's a set of privileges that I have. As much as I can say I come from this poor background, there are people who come from an even deeper pit of poverty than me. So it becomes a thing of saying, in one world you can be poor, but in another world you can be deemed as not so poor. So also it's contextual. So I think I too entertain some of those thoughts to say, yeah, to a certain extent, when I'm in a particular world, I'm not really poor. But when I'm in this world, I can be regarded as a poor folk.
Give me a call. Are you poor? Yeah. Give me a call. Do you consider yourself poor? Do you wear that badge with pride? Under which circumstances do you show up in the world as a poor person? And under which circumstances are you the same person that uses that title as a poor person, considered not poor? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Do you spend the time, do you have the presence of mind to see those multiple identities that you have? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. 011-883-0702. Poor in relation to what and to whom? Give me a call. Poor in relation to what and to whom? Let me throw something at you, Tukelo, that I've observed, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Every time I go to the villages, whether it's on my father's side of the family or my mother's side of the family, if I go to Kwandebele, I go to Arnott and Middelburg and all of those areas amongst the Ndebele people, and I go to the villages there, I see similar things that I see in Polokwane, in Ramamabolo, in all of the different places, Ramokheletsane, and all of the different places, that what we call poor is not necessarily poverty. It's just a lack of certain items of the trappings of what we might understand to be prosperity. Mm-hmm. I argue that in many, many instances, if I go to Thohoyandou and I find people planting and eating of the land, they eat more nutritious food, they are healthier, they are stronger, they are soberer. Talk to me about the general definition of what we call poor in this country.
So I think what I can say, it would be to say it's lack of what you may need in a particular environment. You know, so it's relative the world you find yourself in at that particular moment. So, yeah, those are my thoughts to say incapacity to reach certain things at a particular settings, as you say, maybe what is deemed as prosperity.
And what drives us to want certain things that then put us in the race for prosperity and on the way become poor? I ask this because even historically, part of the reason why people left the rural areas to come into the towns is because they wanted money.
Yeah.
Because the systems and the laws of the time dictated that economic transaction no longer happened via the bartering of cows and chickens and all sorts of things, but cash, currency. And you could only get that if you entered the economic system that could give you money. But I argue that those people were fundamentally not poor. They were made poor by a different aspiration, a different value system, a different economic system. Were those people poor?
Not entirely. They were not.
Talk to me.
So I think also it's a matter of saying there now is a new reality of saying you need to have certain things, and so when you move from the rural coming here, you now find yourself in a different world where, maybe the idea of prosperity and success becomes this. And so now you fall into, the same path of saying, I too want to attain some of these things. And to some extent, we can say it also has to do maybe with the ego or the need for respect. So,
or assimilation?
Assimilation.
Acceptance?
Acceptance. Yeah. So particularly acceptance in that I need to belong. So it goes back to that whole thing of needing a sense of belonging.
Here's my issue, my brother. Here's my issue, and we'll take the calls as they come in. 011-883-0702. That's probably why things like Bitcoin are becoming a big thing now. Because they figured out something. They figured out that the value of anything is what we place on it.
Yeah.
Right? We decide whether the crown that Queen Elizabeth is wearing is valuable or not. We decide it. We give something value.
Yeah.
Right? We either value something or we drop its value. And then it makes me wonder about this idea of poverty. You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
And the value we place on the title of poverty. If it is an illusion, an optical illusion that we create because of our cultures, of our preferences, of whatever. Did I talk about the crown?
Yes, you did.
Oh, I did.
Yes, you did.
Because I was thinking whether that diamond that is on the crown of the Queen would be worth $400 million if it was on another crown. I was just wondering. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So ultimately, what gives value? What is it that makes something worth 400 million rand and not worth 400 million rand? Would the same diamond be worth 400 million rand if it was in my hands? I don't know.
Probably not.
Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? I'm asking these questions because you raise some very interesting issues based on the understanding of poverty that you and I have discussed in the various stories that you've written. But I'm wondering how real prosperity is and how real lack is. Am I going Matrix on you here?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
You feel me? Great stuff. We're going to take some more calls on 011-883-0702. My guest is Tukelo Hlagala. We're talking about his book, Poor Folks. Yeah? Put on those ears because people want to talk to you. So given what we've just done, a few ideas that you and I have explored and thought about and philosophized around, how real is prosperity and how real is poverty? What creates it? What takes it away? What crystallizes it and what dissolves it? And do you deal with some of those themes in your stories?
Yeah. So for me, I think my journey of this book was particularly to document what I felt was poverty, or the stories that I see or that I experienced or have been told around this idea of poverty, to say, I'm poor because I lack 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So for me, I think my endeavor through this book was merely to illuminate the human condition of what it might mean to be poor. And I don't have any solutions because this is a work of fiction and short stories, but I'm merely trying to illuminate, what I see in society and, crystallize with some of my thoughts to say, okay, maybe this is this or maybe this is not.
I want to take some calls, and please give me a call. Are there certain ideas, notions that have become truisms, ideas that have become true, terms that we use that have become true without much reflection and interrogation from you as an individual. Yeah? So if I walk in and I say, I'm poor, do we appropriate that meaning without thinking? Yeah? And what is the result of that? What does it then give us? What is the intended or unintended result of that? I argue that that's what these imposters understand. They understand it as well as the folks that are in the marketing business understand our minds and why they put sweets as we go to the tills.
counter.
Yeah. I think that they understand that thing. But my guest is Tukelo Hlagala, and we're talking about his book, and we're talking about poverty. We're talking about the appropriation of the title versus desiring the experience, and how we sometimes have conversations, Tukelo, about whether certain people have a right to speak for the poor because they don't experience poverty, but they have appropriate the title. And I ask you, when you write this book, are you speaking for poor people or for a poor person?
So for me, I think I'm speaking maybe from an experience of some, I don't know, scintilla of poverty. But overall, I wrote this book for people who might be going through some of the things that those characters in the book are going through, to say maybe you're not alone. So for me, I wrote maybe for people who don't have the luxury of writing, so I wrote for these people. So it's not to say there's some agenda that I'm pushing politically or whatever the case is, but it's to say maybe I see some of the experiences that you're going through.
Yeah.
So to say you're not alone in the struggle, it's something that a lot of people go through. And through some of the conversations that I've had with people who've read my book, they would call me to say, I relate to story number 1 because of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And for me, I think if people can speak about their stories in relation to the stories that I wrote about, I think I've, done my part to sort of see them and their situation.
What do you understand by poverty? Do you understand it as a permanent thing or a temporal thing?
I think temporary. In one of the stories, story number 2, I close the story with a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche when he says, one must have chaos in life to give birth to a shining star.
Yeah.
So in essence, the character has achieved the wealth that he has because of where he came from. So the same situation of poverty, he has to some extent used it to propel him to greater heights. So I definitely say it's temporary.
Let's take some calls. Mpo is in Limpopo. Hi, Mpo.
I'm good, Mr. Masango. How are you?
I'm very well, Mpo. Are you well?
I am well, sir.
Yes, sir. What are your thoughts?
I don't have a question. I have no comment. I just wanted to tell Tukelo that I'm super proud of him.
Yeah.
I'm super proud of him advancing the space of knowledge in Africa. I'm super proud of him for creating platforms in Mamelodi, in Pretoria. And he has extended to Limpopo too. So I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you. We are proud of you. And thank you, Mr. Masango, for hosting him.
Thank you so much, Mpo, for the call. Much appreciated. Charlotte is in Midrand. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Aubrey. How are you?
I'm well. I'm very well. Thank you, Charlotte. Go ahead.
Good, thanks. So, hi, Tukelo. So, I happen to know Tukelo personally.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So, I just wanted to also say that I'm very proud of you. I also have a copy of your book, and I'm proud of the achievement that you have done, and being on 72 is such a big deal. So well done to you. So I just wanted to say with regard to the book and my own relation with poverty, what poverty was for me is growing up, it became a very big motivation for me to work harder in life so that I can acquire the things that I did not have. So that's the role that poverty played in my life. So I love this book, and then I'm still reading it. So, but well done on it. That's what I wanted to say.
Charlotte in Midrand, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Your thoughts about what Paul and Charlotte have to say, Tokelo?
So for starters, I'm grateful. I mean, I think these are some of my biggest supporters, especially in my literary endeavors. I think Mpo is speaking mostly on the storytelling projects that we are having in various high school in Pretoria and in Limpopo. So yeah, he was mostly speaking about that, and I'm glad that we can do, the little that we can with the little resources that we have in terms of, helping these young people write stories. As you'll see here, I've got a collection of short stories. These were written by high school learners in Pretoria, and we recently published this book, and we had a book.
Bloom.
Yeah, so we did this, partnership with an organization called Tulip Thugs from the University of Pretoria. And yeah, basically this is some of the stories that, those learners, have written about. And I think it has also given us a glimpse into some of their thoughts and some of the conversation we should be having with these young people about where they are and the things they value and the things they aspire to get.
One of the things that I am fascinated about by you and your work, Tokelo, and I think Mpo expresses that in a certain way, is that you are adding value to the repository of thoughts, ideas that are homegrown, that are questions and answers perhaps, but I like questions more than answers.
Yeah.
I really do. I prefer questions than I do answers. That at such a young age you are adding, not just quoting, but you're adding thought through things. You're bringing a redemptive quality to the thinking that is of Africa. These are the encouraging shoots of new life that I am proud to be looking at, even as I stand here, personified by yourself. I love the fact that your book is not just about poverty, but about the redemptive quality of the experience of poverty. That it is about the fact that poverty is, if you choose, temporal. It's not permanent. I love the fact that you went there. You went into conversations about the condition of poverty, not just in terms of monetary economics, but just general human economics. Yeah? And I don't know how well your book is doing at the moment. I mean, I don't know how many people are buying it. Are people buying your book?
Some are.
And what are the things that are stopping people from buying the book, you think?
I think maybe sometimes it's attachment to value, to say, is this book worth the $2.99 that it cost? And I think maybe for some people, it's not that valuable. So I would think maybe that could be one of the reasons, or some people maybe don't afford to buy it. So yeah, I have no idea what the reasons might be, and I wouldn't want to speak on anyone's behalf. But yeah, those are just some of, the thoughts that I'm having.
Why should anybody buy your book?
So I think because it gives, people a glimpse into some of, the maybe societal problems that exist in the world. I remember during the conversation we had back in 2020, one thing that you said was that...
What was that about? I mean, you keep talking about that. I remember something. Look, I do a lot of speaking. I go to different functions and so forth. What was this one about, by the way?
So it was around literature and sort of the narrative that writers must have, or the narrative that the writers back then had. And I remember you gave an analysis or an explanation to say some of the writers back then were speaking from a point of rebellion, in that they were rebelling against maybe colonialism, apartheid, and some of those things. And you further went on to say the writer of this day and age needs to understand some of the dynamics or some of the issues that are happening currently in society, and maybe document some of those things that are happening currently for relevance sake. So I'm paraphrasing, but it went, along those lines.
Right.
And I think it's one of the things that I kept in mind during the process of writing this book, to say how relevant are some of the things that I'm raising in this book. So yeah, that's a glimpse of the conversation we had back then, long time ago.
A
lot has happened.
I'm moved by what you're saying to me now, because one of my missions in life is to make young people see themselves now, not through the eyes of their forebears, not through the eyes of them who will come, but to see themselves as the custodians of this moment.
Yes, sir.
And what we do very often is that we live in the past or we live in the future. We never live in the present. And I want to thank you for taking the time to write this book. I want to urge everybody that's listening to this conversation to buy this book. Listen to what I'm saying to you. Buy the book. I'm sure there are many ways of getting the book.
Yes, sir.
How do people get the book?
So the ebook is available on Amazon. Yeah. The hard copy you can buy on afrocentricmedia.co.za.
Right.
Yes.
I'm urging you to buy the book. Not only because you would be supporting a young man and his team, the people at Tulip, Afrocentric Media House, right? This is your guys' media house.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Not only because you'll be assisting them to continue to grow the pool of intellectuals, people that are thinking about stuff and committing time and whatever meager resources that they have to thinking and articulating ideas. Ideas, folks. What do they say? They say most people speak about other people. Yeah? And then some people speak about... I don't know how the saying says, but they say that the really clever people speak about ideas. And you have spoken about ideas in your book in ways that is accessible to many of us. You're encouraging us to read, to challenge our own thinking, our own understanding of the present circumstances that we find ourselves. You're challenging us. I think your value is yet to be understood. And that is why I'm urging everybody that is listening to my voice right now to buy the book. Not to just... How do you get the book? How do people go buy the book? If people want to go buy the book, buy the book.
So we've got an online bookshop there on Afrocentric Media. So the price includes courier delivery. So you just buy online, pay online, and the book is delivered to your doorstep.
This is your business? This is the business you guys have started?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is.
I'll tell you, man, I'm impressed. I'm happy, man. And how much is the book?
Including delivery, the book is $3.95. On Amazon, I think it's $10 or $8 for the ebook.
Are people overseas buying the book?
So yeah, we do have a market right now overseas, some interested, organizations. So we are still trying to, work that out and see how we can, iron out the things that need to be ironed out and those, partnerships.
You are wealthy beyond measure. Don't worry about the present circumstances. You and your children and your children's children will thank you for the moment that you took to write this book. Tokelo Hlagala, thank you so much, my brother, for writing the book and taking the time to come and speak to me.